I want to talk about your mother,
Oh, yeah.
Miss Marion Barnes.
Yes.
I got to give a shout out to her on this date because not only did she contribute a lot, what was she? A writer, a speaker, a researcher, a journalist,
teacher. Oh my gosh.
6 books. She just gave us so many gifts.
She did.
And today is her birthday.
Today is her birthday at February 1st. She was born February 1st, 1923, and she stepped into eternity February 1st, 2012. So
Wow.
my daughters used to call her Manya, and so we say today is Manya Day, and we always have like a peach dessert or grape juice or put cheese all over the food, something she would have really liked. And the other thing we like to do is make sure we get stories told today. This is the perfect day for this.
Perfect day. And she educated me. You know, we wrote little books together and stuff, but she had her own book collection, her 6 books. Oh, it's so much. I don't even have enough time in the world.
She was fun.
And she was the first person that educated me about Aesop's fables. Because as I was coming up, you know, we had a little cartoon. It was on Bullwinkle, and then they would break and go da 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 Aesop's fables.
And he was blonde with a little
curly hair, had a little
headband.
headband. You know, and so she educated me, and she told me, talked about who he was in her research and what he had contributed, you know, to the world of literature. And it's very interesting. And I'm not going to spoil the story.
It is. Let's have a conversation about that, because when you and I were growing up back a little while ago,
I know.
a little while ago, a cartoon would come on, and part of that it was called Bullwinkle.
Bullwinkle
Yeah,
and
squirrel or something.
Yeah.
And so part of Bullwinkle, they would have a little intermission with Aesop's fables. And a blonde-haired guy would come on with his little brown-haired son, and they would tell, you know, the story of the boy who cried wolf or whatever, and you would get your little lesson.
I thought I told you to whitewash the fence, Junior.
I am, Pop.
Well, it isn't necessary to write derogatory remarks about your best friend.
Skinny Aristotle's no friend of mine.
And so you and I grew up thinking Aesop was blonde, blue-eyed,
Yes, of course.
and, you know, a wealthy man living on a hill. And then my mom came along and said, let's, you know, look a little closer past the cartoon Bullwinkle to get our history, shall we? And what we did was we learned about Aesop. We learned that he was a slave. Aesop was born, they think around 620 BC, so 620 years before Christ. Aesop was born, and then he died in 564 BC. So it's a long time ago. But he was mentioned in historical writings and by Aristotle and various people that, you know, wrote things that indicate they knew he was alive. The thing that is interesting is that now, as scholars have discussed and read more, some scholars think they're not sure if there was an Aesop, but there was. There's historical evidence that that he was a slave in central Greece, but he was born outside of Greece. And there is some evidence that he was born in Ethiopia or Turkey, but his name is an adaptation of how you would say Ethiopian in Greek language at that time. And there were some descriptions written of his appearance that say that he was quite dark, and he was unusual looking for the time, and that they thought maybe he might have even had some deformities, but there was not any indication that he was other than a dark person that was enslaved in central Greece.
Okay.
He was originally thought to be mute. So not only was he a slave, but he was considered an ugly slave. And out of all the types of slaves you could be, then he also had this, what they perceived was a defect. They were like, he's mute, he can't speak. And he began, though, to tell stories even before he acquired what they thought of was the power of speech. But obviously what was going on was he was not from there, and he
Okay.
could not speak their language, so he wasn't saying anything. But one of the earliest stories that is recorded is when he was working for his master, who was a philosopher, and he had a large staff of slaves, and the master had some figs set out, and the figs disappeared, and the master was like, "Where are my figs? What happened?" And the other slaves, the other servants in the house were like, "He did it, he did it, he did it." And so he's the new slave. He cannot speak the language, and so he was getting ready to be severely disciplined for stealing and eating the master's figs. What he did was forced himself to drink a lot of water and forced himself to vomit, and all that came up was water. And then he pointed to the other slaves and looked at the master. And so the master was like, "Okay, y'all, not time for y'all. Get to drinking." And when they followed through with those instructions, it was obvious who had eaten the figs, and it was not Aesop. So he began early on, even before he was able to acquire the ability to speak in their language, the ability to tell stories, and to begin to interact with people that were considered above him. The legend has it that he was miraculously given the power of speech by the goddess Isis. Or he learned how to speak the language, which is actually probably, come on. So, and he eventually gained his freedom just through wits and storytelling, and he was the smartest person around. Maybe not the best looking, right?
Okay.
But began to demonstrate that that's not what counts. And so he used his stories to begin to speak truth to power, and did it with animals. So it's like, well, it's not me saying this. It's not me. But,
Okay.
This is a truth. Ultimately, he was an advisor to kings and heads of city-states, and was actually on a diplomatic mission sent to the city of Delphi. And he told a story that offended some of the people in Delphi, and he was set up on a trumped up charge of stealing a cup from the temple. And he's like, I didn't steal it, but they threw him off a cliff and executed him on those false charges. And interestingly enough, there is a belief that he, prior to his death, cursed Delphi for what they were doing to him. And afterwards, they were subject to plague and military invasion and monetary crises as a result.
Interesting.